Hi there, welcome to the Building Your Tiny House Dream video tutorial series. I'm Chris, I run a company called Tiny Industrial, and along with the book of the same title, I'll be showing you how to build this exact house. So follow along, I'll be releasing a new video every Wednesday, and hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Hey, so in this week's episode, we're going to be framing out the side walls. So I'm going to explain to you how I go about doing that, incorporating the spaces that are necessary for the windows, and ultimately connecting the roofing structure we did last week to the lower portion of the trailer, which makes everything stronger and better. So here we go. The top side beams are in. They look like this. So we know the top ones were in already. But now I've cut down these to line up the edge of the roof there. And that's going to be the very end of the roof. Then there's going to be the wall here. So now what we need to do is we need to connect this bottom section up with this top section. So how we're going to do this is we're going to run a 2x3 along here like this, the entire length stood on its side like that. So that's how we're going to do that. Then what I've done is taken the entire distance from that wall to that wall, and I marked out the exact middle, which is right here. I think it was like the total distance was 117 inches or something, divided by 2, takes you to right here. And then what I started doing is, well, I've ordered 3 windows for this wall. They're 12-inch by 12-inch windows. And so I want one right here, the middle of the window to be right here. So I had to measure out 12 inches to get to where the uprights are going to be. And then similarly, that's the middle, that's where I want one window. Then what I did is I went half the distance to that wall, which is where you'd want the second window to be. That turned out to be right here. So, and then again, I went 6 1/4, I believe, inches that way, 6 1/4 inches that way to make sure these windows are going to fit. And then I did the same exact thing here from this point, middle point, to that wall. Wound up being right there. So that's the third window. So the windows are going to determine the framing, and then what we did from there, or what I did from there was, initially I put these wrong marks in because I was figuring 2x4s for the uprights. I'm just going to use 2x3s. So then, that became 2.5 inches versus the initial 3.5 inches. I'm going to run the 2x3 the length of this, and then everywhere you see these lines is where an upright's going to go. And what we're going to do is not just kind of guesstimate where that would hit the top, but we're going to do the exact same thing up here and mark out these same distances on this top beam. So that way I know when these uprights go in, I know exactly where the bottom of the upright is supposed to be. Even when that gets covered, I'll still be able to see the lines down there. And the same thing for up top. And that'll give us 1 upright, 2 uprights, window, 3rd upright, 4th upright, window, 5th upright, 6th upright, window, 7th upright, 8th upright. There's going to be 1 on each side too. So 9 and 10, I guess that is. Is that right? Or 8 and 9, something like that. So there's going to be 1 right here too. Just for stability's sake. That's going to get mounted into the plywood. And again, that's going to run the length, or the height rather, of the wall. So that'll give us a nice area to attach the siding to. We can still run wiring through this. So we're gonna do this. So does that make sense, I hope? So next step is to put that bottom one in. Then we should mark out the top in the same way. Once that bottom one is in, we're gonna cut these all to a uniform length so that this top beam and this bottom section stay perfectly parallel to each other. We'll also make sure in terms of the distance between this one and that one, that stays the same, because if you don't, what can happen is this one, well, they're pretty thick, but I went with 2x4s last time and they tended to flex and bow out a little bit. So that I want to avoid at all costs. So I'm gonna just double check and make sure that that distance remains the same. So sorry for the shaky handheld shot, but that's where we're at. So next up, running the length. To attach this to here, we're gonna glue it, not like the last time where I had to redo it, but I'm gonna glue this or apply glue onto the bottom. Stick it down here and make sure that this lines up nicely with the edge. And then we're gonna send these 3.5-inch screws through from the bottom. As that goes almost, that goes about 3/4 of the way through the top one. Send it through this way. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that could work too. This is the stronger bond, so we'll go with this one. We'll send about 8 or 9 of those through from the bottom, hold everything in place. Yeah, and then like I said before, then it's just about marking out the locations on the top one, adding all the uprights, the studs. That's how we're gonna do it. You may have noticed this is an 8-footer, so it doesn't make it all the way to the end. That's not a big deal. I used another piece down on the end there, and that creates the full 10-foot length. All right, so you saw me put those screws in. I went from like this end down a ways, and then I moved back and forth. Why did I do that? Because you have the ability, when it's attached at certain points, you have the ability to like pull this out or push it in to get a nice straight line. If you were to just go along and just keep doing it, then you're really just attaching this piece of wood with whatever mild or hopefully non-existent curvature it has. So that's the main reason for bouncing around like that. Okay, got this side on, got that side on, perfect. One thing we hadn't done yet was put a bunch of screws back here. Now we do have the bolts connecting it directly to the frame of the trailer for this top outcropping piece. But remember, it sits on top of another 2x12, and that's right underneath there. So in a little ways from here is that vertical 2x12. So we're gonna run a bunch of these, maybe not quite that long. These are 2.5 and I guess 3.5-inch screws. The 2.5s are fine because they'll go through the 1.5 piece of 2x12 and sink by a good 1.5 inches into the underlying upright 2x12. So that's what we're gonna do. Probably gonna do about 8 of those on each side. Is it overkill? Probably, but I like doing it that way. It's not about any single screw holding this thing together, thankfully. It's about the aggregate of dozens, if not hundreds of screws holding this thing together. So that's how we do it. All right, here we go. All right, that's done. Now, I'd mentioned this before, but we're gonna mark out the top beams to mimic the measurements that we put on the bottom here so that we can properly place these uprights in their respective spots. And then we're going to cut these to length. They're all gonna be the same length. We did it right. And we have a number, I think it's, I don't know, 8 or 9 per side. We're just gonna cut these quick on the miter saw, pop these into place. These are going to be a little harder to screw down, so we're probably going to go on the sides of this, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, marking up the top beams. All right, I know it's impossible to see up there, so I'm gonna resort to some Sharpie, and maybe it'll become a little bit more clear. I'll take some pictures as well. But yeah, the markings line up real nice with the bottom ones. You saw me with the water level. Yeah, that works. So I'm just gonna highlight those marks up there, and then it'll be more visually clear. Okay, that's it. Now I'm going to take some close-up video of that so that you can get a better appreciation for the distances and so forth. 40.5 is the magic number. I'm not going to cut all those uprights, but I'm going to cut a couple of them. You want them to fit fairly tight. You don't want them to flop around in there, but you also don't want them to be so tight that it pushes the upright or the top beam out of the way. You know, you can do that. Like, you can put so much pressure on it that it warps and twists other things that can get out of the way of that pressure. 40.5, slightly on the generous side, seems to be the magic number. I'm gonna cut like 3 or 4 like that, and then we'll slot them in and see how that works. All right. Behind me you see a whole stack of these things. We need 20 of them based on, you know, all the markings, one side, the other side. So I've cut these all down to length, and now we're going to be installing them along this wall first, and then I'll do the other wall. Should go in just fine. There's going to be ones, you know, here obviously spaced in, but there'll also be some here on the ends. Just make the whole thing a lot stronger. Anyway, here we go. What you're seeing me do here is put the screws into the 2x3 already, so that I don't have to fiddle with it when it's up there and in position. This way I can just with one hand hold on to the 2x3 and with the other hand drive this home. It's basically poking out of there already. It's right there. See that? So when you have it there, it's real easy to just, and then it grabs right away. Helpful hint. When you see me going over this way, I'm cutting these down a little bit. I made them a hair long, which is good because you'd rather have that than have them be too short. But again, I don't want to power them in there because it's going to warp and twist that top beam. You don't want to put too much pressure on that. It should be kind of snug, not too snug. Also, when it's snug like that, you don't need to worry so much about putting that screw in there already because it's already being held in place by the top beam and the pressure created, you know, in that space. So yeah, use that technique more for the ones that go in a little bit too loose. So it's raining outside, clearly. Remnants of the hurricane coming through. I realized that I need to do the corners. So what I mean by corners is what I will show you here next. So any place like this where you have two walls effectively coming together at a right angle. You have four corners to this thing, obviously. You have a place where you're going to need to mount a wall onto here. You're going to need to mount a wall onto here. Now this wall is fine because it ends here with this nice flat surface. You could easily mount something to this. And I guess you could mount something to this, but you wouldn't want to mount to this because over here is the wall sticks out 1.5 inches and you're going to put insulation in here. So what do you mount something to that terminates in this corner in this wall? Well, you just pop in another 2x3 like this, and then you have a mounting surface here and you have a mounting surface here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put these into all four corners, and that way we have a nice 1.5 inch thick wall here that ends here. We have a 1.5 inch thick wall that runs the length of the trailer. That also ends here in this nice tight corner, and that's where the walls shall meet.